Welcome back to Retro Rebound. In today's video, that's me throwing a fireball in your face with my materia. Final Fantasy 15. We're going back to it because Final Fantasy 16 is here. And I wanted to do a little bit of a retrospective on the last Final Fantasy game we got. You see, this is the beauty of Retro Rebound, truthfully. You know, when you go into a game and it unexpectedly takes on a life of its own. What was supposed to be just a quick dip in the pool for me as a retrospective ended up being a full plunge when I returned to Final Fantasy 15, because I remember the hype for this game like it was yesterday. When Versus 13 was shown off, it was jaw-dropping, and of course Kingdom Hearts fans now know with Kingdom Hearts 4, Tetsuya Nomura is willing Versus 13 into existence. We thought we kind of got it with 15, but no, after seeing some of the Kingdom Hearts 4 content, yeah, we're getting a little bit of that knocked us back. There was the Platinum demo, there was the Brotherhood anime, the Kingsglaive movie, and then there was the $300 collector's edition, which I bought. It came with a cool figure. Let me go grab it in the other room. There we go. It's this bad boy right here, the Play Arts figure, which I know he's in a funny seated position, but honestly, I don't want to unfold him because he's sitting perfectly on a shelf in the other room, and I really like how he is. I'm gonna go put him back now, okay? BRB. Final Fantasy 15 was also marketed as a Final Fantasy for both fans and first-timers. You see it every time you fire the game up. It just reminds you of that little slogan there. So there was a lot of excitement. You know, it's going open world. It's been such a long wait. There was a lot of trouble during development. There were so many pieces to the marketing. And, you know, I'm so happy I went back to it because it was one of my favorites when it came out in 2016. But as I got further from it after platinuming the game, I soured on it. I really did, because I was thinking, you know, the combat wasn't that great. Yeah, the story had a ton of holes in it. It reminded me a lot of how I felt after leaving the theater, after watching The Last Jedi. I was like, that was amazing. And then I rewatched it. I was like, what? Hold on, what? And then, you know, time did its thing. But I went back. I went back with an open mind. I replayed some of the game. I played the DLC, game changer, by the way. And I've come away with a new appreciation for the title. And I think a lot of people should give this one a second chance. Not just because, hey, I had a good time. It's because even myself, guilty as charged, a lot of people are throwing around pretty outdated opinions because the DLC, at least on a narrative level, and in some places gameplay, has addressed pretty much every concern fans had, but no one stuck around to see it, I guess. So I checked it out. I'm here to offer some thoughts as we approach Final Fantasy 16. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, if you're new here and you're into nostalgic and retrospective content, you're in the right place. Consider subscribing. Let's begin with the complete in-box experience with, yes, the collector's edition, the ultimate collector's edition steel book that we got here with Gladiolus on the back. And we, of course, got Noctis on the front. Now, on the inside here, of course, you got the disc. And then you got a bunch of slips. Oh, and you also have the Kingsglaive movie, which, that was interesting. I remember being a little let down by that, but there was so much to this world, and it really spent a lot of time building itself out again with the Brotherhood anime, the Kingsglaive movie. There's just so much there, and I think once it all comes together with the DLC, you have a pretty complete view of it. But when it was isolated to just the game, there was a lot of, wait, what's going on kind of moments, and it could get a little confusing. So you get the Ultimate Collector's Edition DLC. You also get the manual. We'll go through that in a little bit here. You get a promotion for World of Final Fantasy, and then on the back is Zodiac Age, which I remember this must have been just a bad time for me in life because I didn't like this game when it first came out, and now I love 12. We also have Kingdom Hearts 2.8 getting promoted. I Am Setsuna, that's a game I gotta play. Dragon Quest Builders, underrated game. Shout out to DQB. And then Final Fantasy 14, the MMO, which is popping off now. Here we got a little bit of a look on the inside of the manual. Yep, modern manuals, baby. Just love them. And then here on the back, we have the official strategy guide and the collector's edition book, which I also have at my house. And then we got this right here, which is from the Final Fantasy 15 team, sort of like a thank you card. And I thought this was a nice gesture. I love these little banners here. Just so much emo boy energy. And then that's it. That's all that you get in a complete box for Final Fantasy 15. So actually pretty decent amount of slips and whatnot, and plus the 2 discs, plus the steel book. So, you know, long term feel like I got my bang for my buck. But anyway, you're here to learn about the game. You're here to learn about the story again, the gameplay, and maybe just reflect on where we were last time around as we approach 16, which looks fantastic and has a lot of hype behind it. So let's reflect. Well, the story itself is basically Boys Trip the game. You know, it's about friendship, and honestly, going back through it again in some of its high moments, and even when I first finished it, it really makes you appreciate your own friends and reflect on even trips that you've gone on. You know, that feeling, especially at the end of Final Fantasy 15, which, again, we will not spoil, but that feeling you get at the end of a road trip where all your friends must go separate ways, I feel like they handled it so well. We'll talk about that in a moment, but I just feel like when you're on the road with your friends and you're traveling around, you're seeing all these spots together, and then the trip must come to an end, it's such a bittersweet moment. And this game gets that. It gets it really well. Because to me, it's also about the sacrifices that you make for your friends. It was also the introduction for me, like the first time I can really, truly put a finger on it, of Robbie Daymond and Ray Chase, and just the chemistry all these actors had in the booth, especially with Robbie Daymond and Ray Chase and then Max Mittelman. They just all are good friends. They had this funny podcast called, I think, Loud and Very Annoying, and they're just a great time, and you could feel that bleeding into the game a ton. So there's a lot of camaraderie. That's what it's really all built around. But basically, what's going on in this story, for those who don't remember, is Noctis is the crown prince of Lucis and heir to the throne. So following an attack on Insomnia, a great city name, by the way, this is also, by the way, a place you can now see in person thanks to the Arden DLC, Noctis must now retrieve the royal arms and take back his throne. It is a tale that's going to carry you and the boys across Eos, the world for Final Fantasy 15. And the banter is really what helps those slow parts in the very early going of the game, because this group just always has something to say about everything in the game. But it never gets annoying, which I always found surprising, because especially today, when you look at the litany of extremely irritating main characters that we're bombarded with, I really think it's awesome that the brotherly banter here makes any sort of fallout, for example, between them hit that much harder. And just watching them comment on any quest you get, watching them comment on anything that's happening in the game. Normally it's that, dude, it's like the 18th time you've said that, shut up! But that never happens because there are so many individual lines recorded. It's still to this day very impressive, and I don't think it feels forced ever. It's just a really good group of friends that have something to say all the time, which is how it is in my friend group. We just always got something to say about one another constantly. It's really not until Chapter 9 in Altisha that I feel things start to pop off. And yeah, there were definitely gaps in this story, but now I think the DLC has helped a ton. There are still issues, like I think Luna and Ravis aren't in the game enough for the importance they have to the plot. I feel like Luna's just kind of jammed in too last minute around Chapter 9, but Chapter 13 was the one that a lot of people were talking about that needed a plug, and it was that moment a lot of folks pointed at the screen and said, what happened there? And they even helped that gap out with what's called Chapter 13, Verse 2, where you play as Gladiolus and you just get that extra perspective there. And it's like 20 minutes. It's really not much at all, but it also reminded me of just how long that section of the game can be. But it does add some context. But what I really think helps lift this story up even more is the DLC. The DLC in this game is pretty tremendous. Seriously, I don't know how else to put it. Like, it is really good. So let's talk about it. All the party members have these moments where they leave and come back. And in the base game, it's like, bro, where were you? Gladius, why'd you come back all beat up? What happened, dude? Now you get an idea, right? Prompto, when you fell off the train, dude, how'd you come back? Now you get that answer. Ignis, your eyes, dude, what's going on there? Now you have that answer, right? So it brings the spirit of Final Fantasy back, where every character has a little bit of a gameplay quirk in these DLC. And what's great about that is also you get to go out into the open world if you unlock a specific skill, and you can play as these party members in battle. So you can't switch and roam as them, but you can run around and fight as them, which is awesome, because in particular, Ignis feels better to play than anybody. Like, better than Noctis by far, better than Gladiolus, better than Prompto. He's just the best character. And I was like, this is insane to me how different it is from when it launched, where the combat to me was one of the biggest drawbacks. But now with some of the DLC and adjustments they made, is it great? No, but definitely massively improved. However, on the story front, Prompto is the one that surprised me with its emotion and depth of character, given that he's the most unsuspecting one. For those who haven't played Final Fantasy 15, like, Prompto's the jokey, haha, everything's fun kind of guy. Oh, you thought, Oh man. Oh, just the first 30 minutes of that, it's insane how emotional it gets. And you really feel for him. And I'm glad I started with that. I know some people will say, oh, play Gladiolos first, then Prompto first. My advice is if you want the hook, hop into Prompto first, because seriously, I was really impressed. And it's Robbie Damon, man. This guy's got range like it's nobody's business. So he's going from goofy guy with lots of jokes to sad, crying, lost. I mean, what they did and the amount of time it had was wonderful. And then it's action-packed at times. I mean, it just really, really did a good job making me appreciate Prompto, who originally I felt was like the comedic relief, to be much, much more than that, and ends up being one of my favorite members in the entire cast because it really rounds him out and creates some important context to main story moments. But then Ignis, and the way, you know, what happens with his eyes, this to me was awesome, really because of the story moment and how big it was. But more importantly, it's roaming Altisha without it being 1,000,001 little alleyways and boat rides. Like, you can actually get a grappling hook, and I'm just all over the place. And I'm thinking, you know, this is the freedom that I feel like I was missing from the base game. You know, I really liked how there was the road trip vibe, but you're just on the road. There is no shortcuts or, you know, breaking down the barriers and driving over different places, which, based off how the map is structured, you wouldn't be doing that often anyways. But it just feels at times so overly structured, I feel. And I want to break free of those shackles. This DLC let me do that. I wish that they brought it into the base game. I wish they found a way to do that, because it did make exploration so much more fun. I mean, what game gets worse with a grapple hook? What game? Tell me. There's no game that adds that in and you go, yeah, that got worse. It's always a plus. Always. And this game, it really gave you a sense of freedom and opened up a place that, to me, was one of the most confined, claustrophobic type of environments that a video game could offer. So this was a plus. And then Gladiolos is obviously a great time with his combat, with his rage, and getting that explanation. But to me, he's the weakest. But what was one of the pleasant surprises, if you were into the lore of Final Fantasy 15, is you get to play as the villain, Ardyn. It kind of creates this context on why Ardyn is almost willing to aid and at times even harm Noctis. And it also focuses on what drove him to the darkness and functions almost as a prequel of sorts to the attack on Insomnia. And going through that, where Insomnia is like this open world, again, this is another location. Like, I remember seeing that first Final Fantasy versus 13 gameplay where it wasn't Insomnia. At least it looked like that's what it was in a prototype phase. And you never really got a close glimpse at it until a very specific point in the game. By then, it wasn't the way you wanted to see it. So now in Ardyn's DLC, you get to see it alive and well, and then you destroying it. But this, again, adds so much to Ardyn as a character. You really do feel for him. And I think it really just answered all of my criticisms of the base game. Truthfully, like, this DLC does everything right to me. And so what happens is it means that all of this comes together to make that one campfire scene, which we're not going to show and we're not going to talk about, all the more absolutely depressing, because no matter what, you will not be ready. No matter what, this is, even if you think the game is trash, this is one of the best scenes in a video game of the last generation. I will stand by that till the end of time. It hits so hard, but now when you've got the added value of all these characters and the added stakes, I know it's frustrating, like, yeah, they should have sold us this in the first place. Right there with you, but we're here in 2023, not 2016. So I think some time has passed, we can heal and see what it's all about. And they nailed it. So it just really ups the ante of the high emotion scenes. And so yeah, the DLC goes beyond just story. There's the Royal Pack, which adds a new ending scene and immediate access to the ending area, which is pretty nice. Of course, there's ones that are shut down now, like Comrades, which is the Monster Hunter multiplayer DLC. There were events like one for Final Fantasy 14 I did, which is still active. There's one for Terra Wars that I did that's still active. The Final Fantasy 14 one was interesting because they actually used the UI and little sound effects. Because at first I didn't catch it, but then I heard a sound effect and I went, that's familiar. And that's not from this game. I was like, oh, that's 14. And I've only played a little bit of 14. We'll probably make a video on that at some point in time. But, you know, they have cool little events like that in this game that are still active. But then they had ones that are no longer active that for some reason timed. Like, an Assassin's Creed one, which I think also took place in Altissia, which was surprisingly fun. There was a festival in Altissia. This game, I think, clearly got carried away with support because it's very apparent that there are moments of, oh, that's cool with Final Fantasy XIV's quest or the Terra Wars quest. Because Terra Wars is interesting because Sakaguchi, the one behind Final Fantasy and its inception, went on to make his own company called Mistwalker, which made the phenomenal, by the way, Blue Dragon and the phenomenal Final Fantasy 13 you never got, Lost Odyssey, one of my favorite JRPGs ever. And they went on to make mobile games afterwards. It's like a curse, man. Why? Why all that talent and why mobile? But I digress. They made a game called Terra Wars, and so there was a partnership there. So that was cool to see, right? But it's clear that it's clear that the best offering is in the episodes, it's in the DLC, and it's obvious that they got carried away with the marketing, probably because they were trying to generate sales. Because, yes, if you haven't heard, the expansions, the DLC, there were more planned, and they got canned because the support was going on for too long. They ran out of budget. They had to shut things down, so they concluded with episode Arden, at least giving us that look. And it does complete the vision, but there is no doubt a small sour taste. Like, we're never going to get that new angle of, like, Arenia again, like we wanted. She's definitely one of the most underutilized characters in the game, and she looks so cool. And at least in like Prompto's DLC, you get a good connection with her there, so you can feed off that a bit, but it makes you wonder what if. There's still room to explore more, and I know that DLC is kind of a frustrating topic nowadays because it's developers' answers to failing to do their job, and they resell things, and ultimately you end up spending $90 to $100 instead of the $60 that you originally spent to get the complete experience. So it's frustrating. Nowadays, this game is deeply discounted, but all this support, you know, things like Comrades, the events, I think hurt the end game where it got people talking about 15, but I don't think it got people playing. What I think would have got people playing is if they really amped up the marketing on the episodes, because that's where the story lies and that's where it's some really good stuff. So like I mentioned, in the changes for the gameplay, you can play as the other party members. They added a first-person mode, which is pretty nuts. It adds a little bit more intimacy to the exploration, I suppose, but I tried it in combat and, oh dear God, never again. Never again! But it is interesting they added it. I don't see the value of it. There's not even first-person animation, so it's just like you're a floating camera. Again, I don't understand. It's cool, it's there, but this is where the game's just kind of weird, I guess. The combat is still a little bit of a sore spot where you're going to hold circle or mash circle, and then you're going to wait for that prompt right in the center of your screen to tell you, hey, block this attack here. And you'll do so, and you'll counter, and then you'll keep going until you see the prompt again. And it just feels like they anticipated that making this combat reactive would hurt the game, so they went down to the it plays itself kind of route, which is the type of game I abhor. But there was enough changes in the combat here with the other playable party members that felt like, I don't know, actual fighting game systems that I enjoyed it more. With maybe, you know, a little bit more action game systems involved. I thought that'd be a pretty good idea, and it seems like they agreed, and so the episode DLC really answers that. On top of that, I don't like how they handled magic in this game, like turning it into almost a currency type thing and crafting orbs that you throw for spells like a grenade. To me, this is where I remember reflecting on the game about a year after it came out and saying, what were they thinking, man? Like, why would you go this route with it? I get they were trying to get cutesy and creative with it, but that's like messing up the guns in Call of Duty. Like, magic in Final Fantasy is so right there. Like, we've had it done a certain way for 14 games. Let's do it that way. And they just buck the trend and do something else that I just think is so, I don't want to get extreme, but I just find it so out of pocket, truly, that, again, I don't get what the mindset was. And then there is the Ascension system, which is pretty much your perk tree, and it works fine. You know, you get AP and you spend it here, and every character gradually evolves and develops, and that's fine. That's nice. It's not a super deep role-playing game experience because the focus is on exploration, on open world stuff. It's still, though, while you're roaming that open world, has some of the worst side quests ever. That's a Final Fantasy problem. Like, Final Fantasy VII Remake even has awful side quests, and this game has worse side quests. I just don't know why the industry doesn't focus on deep, emotional, meaningful side quests. I don't get it, because like I think of Nier Automata, which did both. It's like, let's tell a black-hearted story but not go overly complex. They did it so well. Kudos to Nier. Kudos to Yoko Taro and Square Enix with that one. But when I look at these side quests, I mean, you want to talk about just busy work. It's go here, collect this item. Go here, take this photo. Yeah, it's so simple. Obviously, because the game had a troubled development cycle, but it's so simple, man. It hurts. Still, though, the game's got the best looking food. There's no denying that. So, ultimately, going back to Final Fantasy 15, I'm happy I did. It's still flawed. It's not deeply flawed, though. I think if you were taking an honest, retrospective look at it on its own, without DLC, there's a lot to love still with the characters. There's a lot to love still with the story, but it's deeply flawed. But with the DLC, with the fixes, with the add-ons, I think there's a lot here to love, and especially those episodes. I cannot overstate how much they add to the game, where even if you've beat the game, there is a chapter select. If you beat the game, you could just go in, you could fire up these DLC. Each one is about an hour, hour and a half. Arden took 2. And you go through these all, and then you could just hop into the chapters and just see the story in little parts and remind yourself, now with that new context, it hits different, trust me. So I'm glad I went back before Final Fantasy 16, which I hope is a much better endeavor. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm looking forward to seeing your thoughts down below on what's going on with Final Fantasy 15, Final Fantasy 16, and your hype levels. So with that, take excellent care of yourselves, and I will see you on the next Retro Rebound. Peace out.